This is my final presentation on Gothic Europe and the Holy Roman Empire, and my name is Mia Serna. Next slide. So just a quick overview of some context. The Holy Roman Empire existed from 1800 to 1806. It is made up of lands in Western and Central Europe, ruled first by Frankish and then German kings as a strong papal authority, and it is a Christendom. And here's just a quick visual image of the lands the Holy Roman Empire occupied. And then within that, we're going to be talking about Gothic architecture. So some main components are stained glass windows, pointed arches, flying buttresses, geometric shapes, and ribbed vaulting. Next slide. So this is the Sacrifice of Isaac. It's made by Nicholas of Verdun from 1181. Gilded copper and enamel, 5 feet and a half inch tall, and it is a detail of the Klosterberg altar from Abbey Church at Klosterberg. So the story of Isaac has a few different meanings. However, I feel in the context of this being at an altar, it symbolizes a sort of death and rebirth, as well as a very strong devotion to God and religion, since the original story is Abraham sacrificing Isaac for God. So I think overall, this piece really reflects the importance of religious figures in art, as well as religion in culture during this time. Next slide. So this is the Limburg Cathedral from 11th century. It was consecrated in 1235, located on the Doemburg, high above the old town of Limburg. The original builder and designer is unknown, but it was built originally as a castle and later a church was added. So this one is very unique in the fact that it has this bright red orange color on the outside, which you don't see in many other cathedrals. And also we can see some of the classic design elements, pointed tops. However, something interesting about this is that although the design itself on the cathedral is symmetrical, the overall shape of the building differs in height. And the inside is a pretty classic depiction of Gothic architecture. We see Jesus on the cross here in the middle, which is a very important symbolic image during this time. And on the inside, we see pointed arches and, of course, the stained glass windows. Next slide. So this is the Westminster Abbey. It's founded in 960 AD, located in London, England. It's the resting place of 16 monarchs and the coronation church since 1060. 40 monarchs have been crowned here, and it still serves as a place of worship and a symbol of faith. So this top image here is the choir room. I feel a lot of this pays homage to the ties with the royal family in London. As we can see, it's pretty grandiose with all the gold and the red symbolizing royalty. And we can see a lot of those classic elements within the interior of the building, and then in the back you can kind of see the high ceilings, and then on the outside we see that classic oculus in the middle, as well as the pointed towers and arches, as well as extensive detail within those. Next slide. So this is the Lincoln Cathedral. It is from 1072, commissioned by William the Conqueror. It's located in Lincoln, United Kingdom, made of Lincolnshire limestone. It's made for a place of worship and community events. So this one here we can see is pretty, I hate to say basic because it's pretty grandiose, but pretty basic compared to the other cathedrals. And we can see these super high windows here, as well as the classic towers and the arches and this little oculus in the middle. And this top image really shows the ribbed vaults here, as well as the scissored wood on the ceilings. And the reason why we kind of moved over to Gothic architecture was because the buildings were having a hard time supporting all this massive weight. So we moved over to ribbed vaults as well as the pointed arches in order to better distribute the weight across the building. Next slide. So this is the Rocken Pieta. It is from 1300 to 1325. It is from Rhineland, Germany. It stands at 2 feet 10.5 inches tall. It is painted wood, and this piece really represents the increased interest in the Savior's suffering and the Virgin Mary's grief. As we can see, Jesus is very distorted here with all of his wounds and blood, and we can see the Virgin Mary's face very distraught. So it's a little bit of a darker depiction of the biblical stories and the importance of this recognition of suffering. Next slide. So here is the crucifixion from 1249 to 1255 from Naumburg, Germany. It is made of painted limestone, as we can see again here. Jesus suffering, and it is right in the middle of the doorway, really conveying that whoever created this wanted this to be the first thing you see when you came in. And as you can see on the outside, we have some vaulting and some of those pointed arches there. And then if you look closely on the inside, you can see the stained glass. Next slide. So this is York Minster. It is 524 feet high, located in Deangate, York, United Kingdom. And it's the largest Gothic cathedral in Northern Europe. Also has the richest collection of stained glass. I really love on the inside here all of the woodwork, and it is all carved out to have that Gothic architecture look. See, although we don't need the columns and the arches here, they're just a design element, which I feel further elevates the whole building. And you can see in the back the scissored ceilings and very high ceilings. And then the front, outside of the building, we have the towers, the oculus. Next slide. This is the Shrine of Three Kings, made by Nicholas of Verdun. It is from 1190, made of silver, bronze, enamel, and gemstones, and it is in the Cologne Cathedral, which we'll see later. And this one is very expensive commission piece, as you can tell just by looking at it. But I think it's interesting that artists during this time were creating sculptures of buildings, which makes me think that it was really important during this time, building and architecture and just creating places of worship that people felt welcome and felt a sense of hope just looking at them, being there, being around them. Next slide. So this is the Cologne Cathedral. It is located in Germany, and it stands at 515 feet tall. It took over 600 years to build this, and it houses the largest swinging church bell in the world. As you can see just by looking at the extensive detail reflects that it took 600 years to build this, and it was intended to be the tallest building in the world when construction started, but obviously it took a while and some advancements were made elsewhere. But you can see up in the top right the stained glass here and the super high ceilings We see a lot of ribbed vaulting, and the black is made of stone, but it eventually ended up turning black due to pollution and the smog just getting on the building. But this one is very, very grand. I have a video here, but I will save it till the end because I don't think I'll have time. Next slide. So these are some design elements in present day. Just a few buildings I found that have incorporated some of this Gothic architecture. This bottom one here, we see the scissor ceilings, and then on the top here, we see the stained glass. Next slide. And then these are just some AI images of what Gothic architecture might look like in the future if we utilized it. So on the left here is just kind of like a classic building you would see like walking down the street. And then these two here are houses. So you can see the like lots of windows, very high ceilings, more pointed structure and arches. And yeah, I just thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, next slide. So overall, Gothic Europe during the Holy Roman Empire was heavily focused on the importance of religion, specifically elements such as devotion and sacrifice. Gothic architecture is intended to bring light and hope in a figurative but also realistic way. So I feel that overall, like, the word goth has a very negative connotation. Even like back in the day, Gothic was used to mean like barbaric, and now when we think of goth, we think like dark immediately. However, like, the Gothic architecture was created in order to bring light physically through the windows and the high ceilings, and then, figuratively with most of the structures being cathedrals and places of worship. And overall, my big takeaway from this is why don't we create buildings that are like cool anymore? Like, everything is just so like bland and square and boring, and I just wish we had more buildings like this, and just more in general in the United States. And it just makes me think that we've kind of lost touch with art within architecture, and we value just building things at a super fast pace rather than building something that is meaningful to the community and to our culture. And yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.